Okay. Hello. Hi. Oh. Hello. Oh yeah, there we go. Hi. I'm Jason. This is Kevin. We both work at a startup here called Pricerazzi. Pretty much does post-purchase price matching, and what we do is relevant because we want to get pricing data on retailers, essentially their products, so that way we can tell our customers, oh yeah, we have found a lower price. What this leads to is we have to scrape a lot of retailers. We make lots of requests to them to get current pricing data, and we have to look into their production code and what's going on in their environments and stuff like that, so that way we can get sane data from them, because retailers, somewhat unsurprisingly, don't really have great environments set up for the most part. And yeah, there's a mixture of like good and bad. Some things are just kind of amusing and not terrible. Some things are pretty bad. I don't think we've run into anything that's quite Equifax level bad, but you know, maybe one day. Okay.
So this is just one example that we noticed from Walmart.com, that they just keep testing data on just right on their production site. And this happens on a lot of different sites. You just search something like test 123 or just something similar to that, and you end up with their testing data.
Yeah. We had one retailer where you put Google into the search bar and it auto redirected you to Google. That was interesting. Yeah, lots of sites have what seem to be interesting deploy processes. As we mentioned before, there's testing data in prod. Obviously, lots of stuff is unminified. A lot of sites don't use CDNs. They just serve things like jQuery from their servers, which is an interesting choice. Recently, as we all know, Sears is like essentially going bankrupt. In the wake of that, they took their DNS server down for a whole day. They just the DNS server was down. You couldn't resolve their website. So that was interesting.
It came up about a day and a half later. It came up with information on how to deal with your final dealings at Sears Canada. So seemed to be a bit of a mistake on their part. There's also every so often we'll see a retailer just not respond for about 2 in the morning and won't respond for about 5 minutes in a row. And we can only assume that they're doing their nightly restarts for the server, that apparently 24/7 uptime isn't too much of a priority for them.
Another example, Expedia had an API, a public API that they had for a while. Just out there, it was publicly documented and everything. But apparently they didn't want it to be out there because one day it just was down. And there was the site, all the documentation was still there, but the API just didn't work anymore. There's no statements about it. So that was an interesting experience. Here's an example of some comments and dev signatures in the code. This was on Coles. Yeah, don't touch the styles, guys. So, oh. All right. Okay, yeah, there we go. So, yeah, that's an example of the kind of stuff we see. If you want to do HP.
Yeah. So there's some weird stuff that we run into. One thing is the search bar that we use from HP to get all their data. It returns a bunch of products if you search on the proper product query, but if you search on something that they don't recognize as one of their products, it can just lead you back to a support page on hp.com, which is certainly interesting. Yeah. There's also, we had an issue with Petco where the way they return data, they'd return some stuff in a query string, and when we would try to forward that along in our own process, we realized it wasn't working. And when we looked at it, it was, instead of using the traditional question mark and equals for query strings, it was just using random characters such as pluses for some reason.
Yeah. Another, this one's more amusing. It's not really a bad thing, but Best Buy has blocked all of Vulture. So if you want to hit the Best Buy API, don't do it from a Vulture server. I can only assume someone was messing with Best Buy using Vulture or something, so they just decided, yep, can't use Vulture to hit Best Buy. There's a lot of retailers where you have to hit a main page to get a cookie and then search. Otherwise, they don't serve you anything. Like, just like nothing happens. Which is kind of interesting as well. We have, this is a fun one. So Costco has priced what I can only assume is obfuscation. You can notice on the price there that the price and list price aren't actually numbers. They are essentially base 64 encoded. And then, so if you go further down, it has a check, price is displayed, then let's process the price. Also, they just, yeah. Yeah, and then this is what process does. So I don't really know what the thought process was in this, but you know, I guess that's obfuscation.
We can only assume it's because Costco has membership and doesn't want to display it to everyone on their site, but still interesting to see.
It's still there.
Could that be like price breakers? And sites are trying to get Costco's prices?
Maybe, but like it's base 64 encoded. Like, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. But yeah, so we have there's a lot of inconsistencies and HTTP abuses out there, which is again relatively unsurprising. Home Depot and Macy's seem to just ignore content type headers. They just arbitrarily return XML or JSON for the same requests, and it just changes. Like one day, I'll search for this product at Macy's, and it'll return the data as JSON. The next day, it'll be XML. Sure. When we're hitting Home Depot Canada, we have to give it a bad cookie so that it gives us a good one. If you hit it with no cookie, it doesn't do anything. You have to give it a bad cookie, something that doesn't make sense, then it'll give you a good one, and then without that, it'll time out.
Yeah, and with Toys R Us in the States and Parts Engine here, their searches would seemingly just fail randomly or succeed just even in your browser. If you would go in and type something, it would just time out after like a full minute. And especially with Parts Engine, that happened on their website for a good year at least before they ended up fixing it only about a month ago.
I don't know how familiar all of you are with the way status codes work, but usually a 400-based status code is used for when the client messes something up, and a 500 is for when the server messes something up. Michael Kors, if you search for a product that doesn't exist, returns a 503. So not a 400, not a 404, not a 200 with no results, no, a 503, which is just, we
can just only hope that we're not crashing their server when you search on something that doesn't exist. Hopefully, it's just a bad thought process.
Is it? Oh, okay. Okay, you want to do Express?
Yeah. So, Express is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a billion-dollar company that does clothing in Canada and the US. And for about 2 weeks, there was a very fun little redirect loop they had where if you hit their non-SSL site, it redirects you to the SSL-based site, which then redirects you to the SSL-based site /Canada, which does the job of setting cookies, which on that level is a good process, and you think it would just return you back to the site, and you're good. But after it set the cookies on /Canada, it would take you back to HTTP, which then redirected you to the SSL version, redirected you to /Canada, set the cookies, and you'd end up in an infinite redirect loop. And that happened in the wild for them for about 2 weeks before they ended up finally fixing it.
Yeah, there was there was no Express Canada website for like 2 weeks. So some websites auto redirect you to the product page if what you searched for only has one result, which is reasonable. Except sometimes they don't. It's just you put it in your UPC code in, and it auto redirects you. You put in another UPC code that only returns one product, and you land on their search page. We have no real way of figuring out what is going on with this, but so for some of our scrapers, we have to be able to scrape their search page and their product page because they just do that. And Carter's did an interesting thing where if they think you're a bot, they put you into an infinite redirect, which instead of blocking you, they just put you into an infinite redirect, which I found relatively interesting as well. There's this JSON here is from, sorry guys. So Ralph Lauren US had a thing for a while where when they updated their cert, it was like a wildcard cert for a whole bunch of different things, and they didn't have ralphlauren.com as one of the valid things in the cert, which was interesting. We've also had another example where someone updated their cert and it was like one of the intermediary certs was invalid. So they updated it and that was invalid. And yeah, there's lots. Apparently retailers don't really have a strong handle on how SSL works. So
we've had a few different retailers where we found things they likely didn't want us to find. The first example, we found an endpoint that had a limit on, you get 10 products from their website or whatever. And it turns out that if you just remove that, it just gives you every single product on their entire website, which I can't imagine is something that they intended to happen.
There was another retailer which did the same thing. And so we were using that. And then eventually they decided that the solution to deal with that was that we'll just make the limit limited to somewhere around 2,200. But their entire product database is less than 10,000 products. So then now it's like 4 requests instead of 1. So yeah. The worst one by far, they had no limits, and there was a query that you could run that would crash their servers. Yeah, so yeah, these 3 we're not going to say who they are, but yeah, so that's those are some of the silliest things we run into when we try to scrape retailers. As you can tell, there's a range in quality in the developers who work for random retailers. There's a range in priority that they put on having a functional website. Some of them don't seem to prioritize having a website at all. But yeah, so I don't know. Does anyone have any questions? So the question was, does anyone do it right? And surprisingly, yes. Best Buy, actually, we found they expose an API, a public API that you can get an API key for, and their website itself is actually quite sane. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but very few websites out there are. So,
yeah, and I'd say along with Best Buy, even though Walmart did have that one issue, Walmart also does it well. They give you an API, and even besides that, it's a very sane process they have.
What's that? I mean,
they're great sponsors of the event.
Overall, the Canadian Tire site is not terrible. They do a couple questionable things, but yeah, they're in the higher degree of consistency, and their website doesn't go down, which is a plus. We've spoken to a couple of them. There's ones such as like Best Buy, for example, who have an API. Walmart has an API. They're very cooperative in that way. We don't even have to talk to them really. Just obey rate limits. There's some others that have been somewhat uncooperative. Like with Target, they have an API. We wanted to use it, but they just didn't really communicate with us. We sent them multiple requests and like, hey, look, like, we're interested in doing this. And they just never even got back to us. I imagine something just like, yeah.
The question was if we've ever got a cease and desist letter, and I can't say we ever have. We do a lot as well to do a lot of bottlenecking and make sure that we're not too harsh on the website to keep that from even happening in the first place.
Yeah, we don't hit them with like, we don't hit a random site with 10,000 requests in a second or whatever. Yeah, like Kevin said, we bottleneck to, I think it's, what is it, like 1 every 250 milliseconds. And so it makes the scraping run a lot slower, but overall that's preferable to just being blocked by everyone and not having a business anymore.
We scrape a vendor's websites just daily. We do it for
Well, like every what?
Every
4 hours?
yeah, about every 4 hours we'll look for everything that we have across all the vendors' websites.
Anything else? All right. Well, thanks guys.